Hey everybody, so I have some watercolor paper here. This is the Tim Holtz Distress watercolor cardstock, and I've trimmed it down to 3 3/8 by 4 3/4 inches. And then I've got my little Epicurean cutting board here, which is heat resistant. And then I've got some painter's tape because I'm going to be adding quite a bit of water to this paper, so I like to have it taped down really well. That's what helps prevent the warping, or at least minimize it as much as can be done. And I always like to make sure my tape is pretty straight so that I've got a really good border here. Okay, now that I've got that taped down, I'm just going to use some ink refills. These are MFT's Color Box Premium Dye ink refills. So I've got Night Shift Blue, Blue Raspberry, and Snow Cone. And you don't need very much of these at all, especially doing such a small piece. Literally a drop is more than enough. I've got just this little plastic palette. If you don't have one of these, you can just use like a plastic plate. Any sort of non-porous dish will work. But I'm just placing a drop of each color in a separate little well on my palette. And then I just need to add a little bit of water. So I added around 5 or 6 drops of water. And then I'm going to take my paintbrush and get it really good and wet. And then I'm going to really saturate this watercolor paper. Okay, so now that that's good and wet, I'm just going to pick up the color and get it onto the watercolor paper. I'm not being particular about it. I just want to get the color on. Okay, so it looks like a right mess, but that's kind of part of the appeal of this. And now I'm just going to take my paper towel and just kind of mop up some of the excess water and color just along the edges here without completely soaking up the color on the cardstock. And now for the fun part is I've just got regular old salt, table salt. That's all you need. This is a really neat watercolor technique, and it works with these little dye ink refills as well. But you just grab a little pinch of salt and you sprinkle it onto your watercolor. And you can see immediately the salt immediately starts to absorb some of the color. So now it's just a matter of getting this dry. Okay, so now that it's dry, the salt is pretty much stuck to this. You can either use your finger and rub it off, or I like to just actually take my little stencil spatula and gently scrape it off. You don't want to use too much pressure because you don't want to like scratch up your surface, but I find this works really, really well. And then I just hold it on an angle and scrape it into my garbage. So I've got the You Mean the World to Me Centerpieces Dynamics. And I've just got a piece of Night Shift Blue cardstock, and I'm going to run this through my Big Shot. Okay, so I'm left with this, and I purposely didn't peel off the tape from my watercolor piece. I'm going to have to leave that for a minute because I want to tape the die cut over it. So I'm going to cover up the letters and then just use a couple small pieces of tape to hold this into place as a makeshift stencil. And then I've got my Viva Decor glitter paste that I'd shown in a haul a few weeks ago. So I'm going to get that on my trusty little spatula here. And then just apply that. Okay. So I want to make sure to get this closed up quickly so that it doesn't dry out, and quickly wipe off my spatula with a baby wipe. And that's where this is nice, having a makeshift stencil. Otherwise, if it was a plastic one, I would take it to the sink immediately and clean it off. But since this is cardstock, I can just throw that out. And so I'm left with this really cool glittery world. So this I have to set aside to dry. You can't, sadly, heat set this with your heat tool. It'll make it bubble. Like, it literally almost boils this paste. It's really weird. Trust me, I tried it. And it's not pretty. So this has to be set aside, and because I used cardstock as my stencil, it's quite thick. So we'll see how long this takes to dry. Okay, it's been roughly an hour since I did this, and it still looks wet. However, it's not 100% dry, but it's pretty close. I would give it at least a good, probably couple hours then to make sure it's completely dry, but I want to get this card done. So I'm just going to be careful with this spot. And I'm going to peel off my tape. Now, working with techniques like this, when you're like working really wet and using ink refills, it does have a tendency to seep under the tape a little more than normal. I'm okay with that. However, if it really bothers you, you can take a craft knife and just gently scrape the color off. And then you just take an eraser and smooth it out again. So it works all right. I just honestly prefer just leaving it. Okay, and I've got a piece of MFT's primitive white cardstock that I've cut to 3.5 by 9 3/4 inches. And since my little scoring board doesn't have a score at 4 7/8, I'm just going to use my paper trimmer. So you just line it up to the 4 7/8 mark here. And using the little cut line here as a guide, you can score your card. Okay, and I've used a ton of foam tape because it gets quite warped from the watercolor and then from the embossing paste. Okay, so to adhere the letters that I had die cut when making the mask, rather than throw them out, I thought I would use them on the inside of the card. So I've just applied some Tombow Monomalti to a craft sheet, and then I'm picking up the letters with my little quick stick, which I got from MFT, and it's basically got temporary adhesive on the end here that'll pick up these letters, and then I just kind of dab them in the glue gently and then dab off the excess so that it's not oozing out everywhere, and then applying it into place. Okay, so there is the finished card using the You Mean the World to Me dynamics. There'll be more info on my blog about the release. This will release on Tuesday, so the link to it won't go live until then. But yeah, more info will be in my blog post. So as always, there'll be links to my blog post and to the supplies used and everything else directly below the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.